Before sunrise, in cities across Europe, doors were kicked in as a coordinated wave of police raids unfolded simultaneously. German authorities, backed by investigators in Bulgaria, Cyprus, the Netherlands, and Ukraine, were targeting one of the most sophisticated credit card fraud networks ever uncovered. By the end of the operation, 18 suspects were in custody, accused of quietly siphoning more than 300 million euros through a maze of fake subscription websites. For years, the network had operated in the shadows, using stolen card data to drain victims a few dollars at a time, small enough to go unnoticed, but multiplied by millions. What investigators discovered shocked even seasoned cybercrime experts. This wasn't a loose criminal gang. It was a full-scale corporate machine designed for fraud, complete with IT teams, shell companies, payment processors, and offshore servers. And now, after months of surveillance, digital forensics, and international cooperation, the empire was finally collapsing. The fraud network's entire operation revolved around a simple but highly effective idea: hide small recurring charges inside fake online subscriptions. Using stolen card data purchased from the dark corners of the internet, members of the group created dozens of convincing websites that promised trial offers, streaming services, lifestyle products, or premium memberships. None of these services actually existed, but the pages looked real enough to avoid suspicion from automated security checks. Once a stolen card number was entered into their system, the network's payment processors would begin charging the victim tiny amounts every week or every month, small fees that blended into routine banking activity. Most victims never noticed a thing. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the criminals were routing these micropayments through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts, disguising the money as legitimate subscription revenue. To maintain the illusion, the group built an entire ecosystem of fake customer support operations. They rented cheap office spaces, filled them with low-budget call center equipment, and hired unknowing workers to answer phones under the identity of made-up companies. Scripts were prepared for every possible complaint. If a victim called to question a charge, the support agents, who had no idea they were part of a criminal scheme, were trained to apologize politely and promise that the subscription would be canceled immediately. The criminals even set up automated email systems that generated receipts, welcome messages, and cancellation confirmations, all designed to convince banks and credit card companies that the businesses were real. From the outside, it looked like a fully functioning customer service department, but in reality, it was a shield built to protect a global fraud empire. Investigators later discovered that the entire operation ran like a real corporation, with IT specialists managing servers, designers creating website templates, and financiers moving the stolen funds across borders. It was fraud engineered with precision, and it allowed the network to steal quietly for years. What investigators uncovered behind the scenes was far more complex than a random group of cybercriminals working from their bedrooms. The fraud ring operated like a fully formed corporation, complete with departments, hierarchy, and specialized roles. At the top were the organizers, individuals who coordinated the flow of stolen card data, managed the shell companies, and made decisions about how the money would be moved and laundered. Below them, teams of IT specialists worked daily to keep the infrastructure running. They maintained servers in multiple countries, monitored traffic on the fake subscription websites, and built tools to automate the processing of stolen card numbers. Their job was to keep the machine smooth, silent, and always online. Another division handled the creation of the scam websites themselves. Designers and web developers produced templates that looked polished and professional, making the fraudulent services appear legitimate enough to avoid detection from both customers and automated fraud filters. They constantly updated layouts, logos, and product pages to match modern internet trends. Meanwhile, financial operators worked in the shadows, managing the movement of money. They created shell companies in distant jurisdictions, opened merchant accounts, and built a payment chain that disguised the true source of the funds. With each transaction, the money traveled through multiple layers, making it difficult for investigators to trace. Together, these divisions formed an international fraud syndicate that looked less like a criminal gang and more like a global tech company, one built entirely for theft. And for years, the system allowed them to operate undetected, generating a steady stream of illegal revenue while hiding behind the appearance of legitimate business. The investigation into the fraud network did not begin with a dramatic raid. It started quietly, with scattered reports from banks noticing unusual patterns in small recurring charges. These alerts were subtle, easy to overlook individually. But when analysts compared data across borders, a larger picture began to take shape. The same fake subscription companies were appearing in card statements from victims in dozens of countries, all pointing toward a single hidden source. German authorities were the first to flag the pattern, but they quickly realized the operation stretched far beyond their own jurisdiction. To move forward, they needed help. Law enforcement agencies in Bulgaria, Cyprus, the Netherlands, and Ukraine joined the effort, forming an international task force dedicated to identifying who was behind the scheme. Each country brought a different piece of the puzzle. In Bulgaria, investigators traced servers used to process the fake subscription payments. In Cyprus, authorities uncovered shell companies tied to the group's financial operators. Dutch cybercrime investigators found evidence linking the scam websites to hosting services in multiple European regions. And in Ukraine, digital forensics teams identified IT specialists who maintained key parts of the fraud infrastructure. As the task force connected each clue, the scale of the operation became impossible to ignore. What had started as a few suspicious charges had evolved into a full-scale international manhunt. Surveillance teams monitored suspects across several cities. Financial analysts worked day and night to follow the money through multiple layers of accounts. Cyber units gathered logs, server data, and encrypted communications, mapping out the network piece by piece. Month after month, the walls closed in. The investigators knew they had to move carefully. If the fraudsters realized law enforcement was closing in, they could vanish overnight, servers wiped, accounts drained, identities erased. Every step of the chase required patience, secrecy, and cooperation between countries that rarely worked this closely together. But slowly, steadily, the task force built the case they needed. By the time the investigators were ready to strike, they had uncovered the full architecture of the operation. All that remained was to coordinate the final move, a synchronized wave of arrests across the countries involved. The chase was over. The takedown was about to begin. When the coordinated raids finally hit, the fraud network had no time to react. Across several countries, officers seized servers, documents, computers, and luxury assets tied to the operation. The organizers were arrested, the shell companies frozen, and the payment chains cut apart. For the first time in years, the entire system went dark. Investigators called it one of the most effective international cybercrime takedowns in recent memory. But they also warned that networks like this are always evolving, always rebuilding, and always searching for new victims. The fall of this group was a major victory, yet it was only one battle in a much larger war against global credit card fraud. For expert insights from Teleris, the cybersecurity company using AI to fight cybercrime in real time, check out their tools, reports, and resources to stay safer online on Teleris.com. And if you want to stay ahead of the scams shaping our world, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.